Now entering Nerdist.com.
The Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 3, Charlie X.
From the halls of the Vulcan High Council to the shores of Ceti Alpha 3, this is The Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. He's John Champion.
And he's Ken Ray. Every week, we look into the glass onion that is an episode of Star Trek, peeling back the layers and seeing what the show is all about. What are the messages, the morals, and do they and the production itself stand the test of time?
This week, it's Village of the Damned meets the X-Men meets you. We say hello to Charlie X.
You know, I never thought of it as the X-Men.
Really?
Of course.
Yeah, it's totally the X-Men.
It is.
We could actually finish the show right now and just, just read an issue of the X-Men. It's like, oh, it's a teenager, and suddenly he's got all this stuff, plus the raging hormones, and, plus it's got the X in the title. So really, that you missed that kind of, worries me.
Just right in front of me.
Yeah. Well,
and he's distrusted by everyone around him. Yep. Charlie X is, it's one of those episodes that I owned on VHS and I watched over and over again. And I think as a kid, you can kind of identify with Charlie. But to me, it was just sort of like, well, here's the bad guy of the week. And I have to say that rewatching it now for our show, I felt so much more sympathy for Charlie, and I really appreciated it on a whole new level.
Yeah.
I liked it quite a lot.
It's again, not to hammer this home, and I don't think we're even going to mention it the rest of the time, but it is the X-Men. I don't honestly know which one came first, but whenever you hear an analysis of the X-Men, you hear that one of the reasons it's so popular with teenagers is because, teenagers are changing and they feel like they've got so much stuff they want to do and they've got all these powers, but they also feel completely ostracized, which is kind of funny because we put them in buildings with like 400 other teenagers.
Right. Right.
And yet they all sort of feel like, lost and alone. And certainly, Charlie was much more lost and alone than most teens, but I guess that's the whole, maybe that's the whole point. Hey, let's just skip to the end of the show again. You want to?
No. Well, in this episode, they put him in a ship with 400 adults, 400 hard-working adults. So he gets to be a very powerful fish out of water. Do you want some trivia about this episode?
Do I?
Of course you do. Everybody knows this, but we have to mention it, that there's a scene where the chef comes over the PA into the bridge, interrupts a very dramatic scene. But never mind, they always pipe through the chef to the bridge when there's something important. Announcing that the meatloafs have turned...
Wait, don't tell that part yet.
Oh, okay.
Don't tell what he's announcing, just, because that's not trivial. You say that he's interrupting, and I'm saying he's actually moving along the action, but don't even tell that part yet. Who's the guy who's, talking over the intercom?
Well, the chef is Gene Roddenberry. It's his one and only character bit on Star Trek. We don't actually see him, but we hear his voice, and that is the man himself, the boss, Gene Roddenberry, who is the voice of the chef. I thought that was so cool.
Could you do that? Like if you were doing a show, and I don't mean because we're doing a show, but if you were doing a show, right? Like Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica or
right.
Smallville, I don't know, General Hospital, let's say. And if you were doing a show and you were responsible for years of a show, could you really? Wouldn't you be tempted to Hitchcock it every now and then? Just show up randomly someplace and just be there.
Well, it didn't hurt Hitchcock at all.
Right.
And
at the same time, Hitchcock wasn't doing a weekly show. If every week Gene Roddenberry had shown up, eventually people would be like, why is he always, there's always a guy in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, given me, I might even take it a step further. I'd stand in for Captain Kirk, stunt double for Mr. Spock. I just throw myself in wherever possible.
And eventually it becomes Star Trek, a one-man show starring John Champion.
And why not?
Everybody. And the bad guy of the week, too.
Yeah. Now, the story was actually written by Gene Roddenberry. He conceived it, he created it, but the screenplay was written by D.C. Fontana, who is, she is sort of a force of nature within Star Trek. Young woman, started out as a story editor, became she started out as a writer, kind of contributor, became a story editor, and, look at her IMDb. She is just lousy with credits and a highly, highly respected creator of scripts and entertainment. So I always like to look for her name in stuff. And she probably knows more about Star Trek than just about anybody who is alive today.
And I know you also want to give props to the music man.
Fred Steiner, who did a lot of Star Trek music. I think he did a few dozen episodes of Star Trek, did the incidental music. And, like I said, this is an episode that I've watched a lot. And I like the idea that Trek is a show that we can pick up new details every time we watch it. And the music really stood out to me this time. I thought it was just creepy and moody, really set the tone. So that really stood out to me on this viewing of it.
Yeah, it's not signature music the way, we're so far away from this episode at this point, but the way the music in Amok Time was, I mean, that music has become like a cultural touch point / joke sometimes. I mean, the Cable Guy, they reference that music. That music is like, that music sort of almost transcends. This is not that kind of thing. This is not the shower scene in Psycho. This is not, Amok Time. This is not Superman flying in to save the day.
No.
But it's great. I mean, it's not, I guess you would technically call it incidental music, but it doesn't feel like that. It's not quite a character, but it certainly does. It certainly does a better job of setting the mood than a lot of music that you hear on TV, both from that time and today.
Well, that's the thing. It's very theatrical, and it doesn't have that sort of cheap sound of TV music. It's really nice.
Although in the scratch track, it was just a guy on a kazoo. Actually, I think it was Gene Roddenberry on a kazoo.
On a kazoo.
But really, this is going to sound much better later.
The man can do anything.
Addition. What happens when you add X to the crew of the Starship Enterprise?
The Antares, a survey ship, pulls alongside the Enterprise and drops off a castaway, Charlie Evans. Charlie was a sole survivor for more than a decade of a crashed ship on an uninhabited planet called Thasus. The Antares captain and first officer are suddenly very kind about Charlie, but also a little anxious to get going after getting a look from their passenger. The look means that Charlie has some sort of mental powers we don't yet fully understand. Enter Yeoman Rand and cue the love-struck music. "Are you a girl?" Charlie asks, and before we hit the opening credits, we know something is up. Act 1. Charlie's first stop is sickbay, where McCoy declares him to be in great health. This is the first expression Charlie makes about just wanting to be liked, and in his infinite country doctor wisdom, McCoy agrees that we all do. Charlie leaves to take in what the rest of the crew are doing and oddly catches a conversation between a couple of guys who are going to hit the gym later, which ends in a butt slap, a friendly butt slap. He later encounters Yeoman Rand in the hallway, presents her with a bottle of perfume out of nowhere, and then proceeds to give her the same slap on the butt he witnessed earlier. This move doesn't go over so well. In one of those rare moments when we see the crew completely at leisure, a clearly amused Spock is playing his harp while Uhura improvises a song about Spock's darkly seductive powers. She switches to a song about Charlie when he enters the room, and he uses those mental powers this time to rob Uhura of her voice. He then proceeds in his attempts to woo Rand with impressive card tricks. Impressive because they are physically impossible, but no one notices because they are tricks. And by the way, no one seems too concerned at all about Uhura and Spock. In a corridor, Kirk is telling a crew member that with Thanksgiving approaching, he wants the synthetic meatloafs to be shaped into turkeys. The duties of a captain never end. Charlie shows up, and Kirk starts to explain why that friendly slap on Rand was definitely a bad thing to do. Just in time to save him from the awkward conversation, a call from the bridge brings Kirk back with Charlie in tow for a message from the Antares. Just as the captain of the Antares is ready to deliver a warning, the communication is cut off, and Charlie exclaims that the ship wasn't well constructed. Spock confirms that only debris of the ship remains. Before their suspicions get too close to Charlie, a message from the kitchen to the bridge, I don't know, reveals that all the synthetic meatloaf in the oven has now been magically transformed into real turkeys. Charlie lets out a laugh. Act 2. It's our first view of three-dimensional chess as Kirk and Spock play a game and talk over what happened to the Antares. Charlie steps in and asks to play, and Spock handily wipes up the chessboard with Charlie's ego. We know what's coming now. Charlie's eyes roll back, and the wrath of his look melts the chess pieces from their game. Moments later, Rand attempts to introduce Charlie to another younger yeoman named Tina. Charlie brushes off the attempted blind date, and he further tries to express his feelings for Rand. She takes this problem to the captain, who so far is not putting together Charlie's outburst with the problem of constantly hitting on his female crew. In his quarters, Kirk really tries to buckle down with a father-to-son kind of talk to settle down Charlie's hormones a little. Now it's time to focus those hormones into a more constructive way, and the guys head to the gym where Kirk is going to teach Charlie how to throw another man. Sam may as well be standing there in a red shirt. Well, he's in red tights and a red robe, and when he laughs at Charlie's ineptitude, Charlie breaks out the look again, this time making Sam completely disappear. Kirk calls security, but Charlie merely tosses him aside with his mental powers. Kirk, calmly but forcefully, puts on the father voice and makes Charlie go back to his room. Act 3. Spock speculates that Charlie may not be human, but rather a Thasian, the legendary former inhabitants of the planet where Charlie was found. McCoy insists that Charlie is in fact human. Charlie does finally admit that he was responsible for destroying the Antares, but he justifies it by saying that the crew weren't nice to him. Charlie, now exposed as a threat to the Enterprise, starts exercising his powers at will. He tampers with communications, navigation, even messes with Spock's oratory. Kirk, who seems to be the only one Charlie respects, lays a smackdown and again sends Charlie away with a few choice words. Charlie runs into Tina again, and he turns her into an iguana. He then shows up at Yeoman Rand's quarters and produces a pink rose. She's about had enough and tries to finally make him stop. Act 4. Rand uses the in-room communicator to alert the bridge, and Kirk and Spock come running to the rescue. Charlie throws Spock and Kirk against the wall and makes Rand disappear after she slaps him. Spock's legs were broken from the impact, but Kirk forces Charlie to let them go and fix Spock's legs when he admits that he can't run the Enterprise on his own. In an attempt to confine Charlie, Kirk lures him to a brig, but Charlie simply makes the wall disappear and freezes Kirk and Spock long enough to tell them that they'll be sorry. He wanders the halls a little more, doling out some twisted punishments, making a young woman turn old, wiping the eyes, nose, and mouth from a laughing crew member. Finally, we're getting closer to Colony 5, where Kirk had planned to drop off Charlie, but now he's having second thoughts. Kirk decides to stop Charlie by turning on every ship system at once. Charlie is overwhelmed, and Kirk makes his move. Just as he's about to throw a punch, a Thasian craft shows up alongside the Enterprise, and Yeoman Rand reappears on the bridge. The non-corporeal head of a Thasian manifests itself on the bridge and explains that they gave powers to Charlie so he could survive. Charlie begs to not go with the Thasians. Kirk attempts to negotiate for him to stay, but it's out of his hands. Charlie's last plea explains that the Thasians do not love and cannot feel. It's too late, and he disappears from the bridge.
You know what I love about this?
What's that?
Well, it's kind of nice. I mean, they make the Enterprise a tiny bit more accessible, because we've talked, just in the three episodes that we've done so far about how they've got the video phones, which is so far in the future for the 60s, and they've got, the communicators, which are so far in the futures for the 60s, or in the future for the 60s, excuse me. It's nice to know, though, that electronics haven't changed that much in the 23rd century. To stop Charlie, they're pretty much just going to overload the circuits of the Enterprise by turning everything on all at once.
Yep.
Which is Spock, you do laundry. Bones, you turn on the coffee maker. I mean, it's like my house, honestly, in some respects.
Right.
And so I kind of appreciate that. I kind of like the fact that, at the end of the day, oh, sure, it's a ship that can fly through space, but, seriously, don't run the dishwasher and the coffee maker at the same time.
Right, right. Because all that copper wiring can't take it. All that 23rd century copper wiring and coaxial cable is just going to fry.
Yeah, and that of course, and there was actually something else, and we didn't mention it in the recap because it's not important. But again, just sort of the accessibility thing. When Charlie first starts to take over the Enterprise, Uhura thinks that she's receiving a message. I believe this is when the Thasians first try to contact the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Uhura goes to try to boost the power, and the console basically blows up at her. And she turns to Kirk and say, there's no reason that this should have happened. I checked the wiring 15 minutes ago. Really?
Right.
On a starship. I understand she's the communications director, but really, it's sort of like I don't expect Bones to fix his tricorder. I think there's probably a guy, or maybe they got another tricorder. I don't expect Uhura to really, I mean, she's like Ernestine, the operator that Lily Tomlin used to
pulling out the plugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, maybe
blackmail is
maybe.
such an ugly word, Mr. Thasian.
Well, just maybe they have a checklist, and when they show up for duty, they've got to take it apart. They got to make sure it's all working. Just like you would in real life. Yeah. Not ever.
Well, not so much. Yeah.
Before we started recording, I actually took apart my computer and gave it a good dusting and put it all back together. So that I knew it worked correctly when I talked to you.
Back in the day, I was a board op for a couple of different radio stations, and I knew that the board would flip up. Mm-hmm. Like the top of the board where the faders are. I could flip it up and I could look inside. And occasionally I would just because it looked neat. But seriously, if something went wrong, I called my engineer.
Yes.
I did not, flipping up the board was like something I did when I was bored and nobody else was around because, I was operations director and I might have actually gotten in trouble for flipping up the board because that was the place that I shouldn't go, even as operations director. There's also a bit more, there's another weird thing about the ship. We talked in The Cage about how frontier things were, where slave trading might be fine, and we're going to leave these people who are stranded because there are other people that we know we can help. Mm-hmm. There's less of a frontier feel on this one, and more of a ship feel, which I know it's a ship, but I mean like a sailing ship in the middle of nowhere. When Uhura is singing, she's basically like she's freestyling shanties.
Yeah,
in a way. They're not pirate songs because everybody doesn't know them, but you got one guy playing the one instrument that he has, say, the guy who was on deck with the squeeze box or whatever, except this time it's Spock with his mega small harp, but mega harp nonetheless.
Boy, and he's got a grin on his face like nobody.
Yeah, I know, kind of weird.
He's just happy about it.
Which is odd.
Yep.
It's illogical to be happy about people making up songs about your devilish look.
I know.
But okay. And there's a familiarity to the crew as well. I mean, you talk about the butt slapping. I mean, there's a familiarity to the crew here that is not always felt in all of the episodes. I mean, that the characters that know each other and like each other, but my God, these people are happy to be on the ship until, along came Charlie.
At a certain point early on, it's kind of like a sales video, like a recruitment video for the Enterprise. It's like you're walking down the hall and people are just smiling at each other and they're doing their jobs and they're just smiling. You got the guy kind of with the pipe that he's lowering down into the floorboard and he's just happy to be there. And it's like, come on down and join the Enterprise.
You got the guy up in the crow's nest and you got the guy sliding down the sail and...
Yeah.
I may have actually started watching a different movie halfway through now that I think about it.
Maybe. But on a more serious note, the thing that I really like about this episode is not just because Charlie is a really well-developed character and all that, but I love that in the ending of this, you have this ambivalent kind of dark ending.
Wait, you're going to jump to the ending?
Well, I'm just talking about things that we enjoy. And that's what I was left with in this episode. Like, you have all this happy-go-lucky fun times on the Enterprise. And again, we have another episode where people are hitting on each other and kind of flirting with each other. But then by the time we get to the end of this, we don't know what really is going to happen to Charlie. We don't know what the rest of his life is going to be like. And they kind of lower the lights on the bridge a little bit and say, well... I guess that's over now, and then move along.
Yeah,
there's no slap on the back, no little musical sting at the end, none of that.
Yeah.
So
I really want to come back to that in a bit.
Okay, no problem.
I'm not saying we don't want to talk about it now, but I guess I am.
No problem.
Because this is see, I can't do it now, though. Okay, we'll get to that.
What you want to do?
Stick around to the end of this show to find out what we thought about the end of this show. How's that?
All right. Very good.
The New Oxford American Dictionary defines X as denoting an unknown or unspecified person or thing. So how do we define Charlie X?
Talk to me about morals, themes. I mean, because the way I do these shows, forgive me, the way I go into this show is I watch the show twice. The first time I'll watch it, I'll just sit there and watch it. And the second time I watch it, I actually go back and make notes about almost every minute of the show to try to pull stuff out. And this was you were not hit over the head. There's a lot to think about in this episode, but you were not hit over the head with the... I mean, we go back to the man trap. We talked about the ecological sort of idea of the buffalo and the last of them and all that. There's not that theme here. I mean, there's the angst of adolescence in a way. I'm trying to figure out what the morals are. I mean, it almost feels like the simplest, most direct moral of this story might be there are more important things than being liked. And I know that sounds so incredibly simple, but that really is like all of Charlie's trouble boils down to. He wants to be liked more than he wants to be good. And because he wants to be liked and can't really work at being liked, he just wants it to happen, he ends up, for all intents and purposes, I don't want to say he's on a prison planet. I mean, it's not like he was sent to Seleucus Secundus or anything like that, but he ends up in sort of in isolation because what he wanted more than anything was to be liked.
Yeah, well, he wanted to be liked, and this was the first time in 15 years that he had ever been around other human beings. Right.
And last time he was 3, and he really didn't appreciate it.
Yeah, really did not appreciate it at all.
Like a 3-year-old.
Right. So, it's not one of those morals like, hitting you over the head saying, remember, kids, don't make people disappear. Or remember, kids, don't break the legs of the person who's coming to rescue the person that you're trying to rape.
Although let's be fair, those are both good morals.
But that's not the point of the show. I think this is more of just kind of an exploration of youth angst. And that's what I thought was so interesting about it, that here it is in the 60s, and Star Trek is this very progressive show. Kind of showing many, many aspects of society. But I feel like within Charlie X, Charlie's goal is to be liked, but part of that being liked is to sort of be assimilated into the structure of the Enterprise. This is a very establishment, mainstream work environment. Everybody there is there to do a job, and headed by the captain, and the orders come down from the captain. And, the only way that Charlie's going to fit in is if he acts a little more like them.
So I'm sorry, are you actually putting out there that the moral of this episode might be conformity?
I think there's a part of it. Yeah, I really do. Huh. I feel like I said, here's a show that's, right at the height of kind of counterculture, youth movement. We're just rushing headlong into Woodstock and all of this stuff. And I do feel like there's this little thread within the story here that is about conformity and establishment and working within the structure. They're all very kind to Charlie. They're all very nice to him. But, you really respect Kirk and being that father figure and just putting the foot down and realizing that Kirk is the only one that Charlie really won't stand up to. Because that's all he needs. He just needs that kind of, strong figure. Now, it does come to a head at the end, but throughout the episode, Charlie could have just made Kirk disappear over and over again, but he didn't.
Well, I mean, there is an implication that he actually needs Kirk. And I don't just mean as a father figure. I mean, you talked about the part where he is forcing his affection on Yeoman Rand, let's say.
Sure.
And Kirk and Spock come running in, and Charlie makes it clear that he needs Kirk to run the ship.
Yeah.
Even when he takes it over, he still feels that he needs Kirk to some extent to run the ship.
Right.
And that's how Kirk gets, Spock out. So it's not just the father figure thing, although certainly that is a huge part of it. I have to say, though, I'm going to go another way on it. I mean, because I definitely did get the conformity angle when the show was going on. I wonder, though, if there's not also a message here for parents, which may sound like I'm reaching, and I guess maybe I am a little bit, but stick with me. The Thasians say that they gave Charlie their power. And their power, I don't know that their power was, Spock laid it out at one point. They can make things appear and disappear, and mind control and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they're
right.
Think of the not the menagerie. Think of the cage, but actually being able to physically do stuff like
right.
The cage that the Thasians built would have stood up to that laser, buddy. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Being a 3-year-old in a hostile environment, them giving him their power is likely true, and it likely is what saved his life. But I mean, let's apply this to what happens today, or what's been happening, for the past 50 years, let's say. Families who give kids cars with no real appreciation on the kid's part of how to take care of the car, how to drive responsibly, what it costs, what went into getting the kid the car. Wealthy families, say, who give kids every advantage and privilege, but no sense of how to act in society with others who don't have those advantages or privileges. There's a cold standoffishness about the Thasians.
Yeah.
That's driving Charlie nuts. I mean, and this is the poor little rich boy story in a way of, given everything except, a clear understanding of how to act in society. You think about the Menendez brothers, if you want to, and that's sort of horrible, except it's not, because, they killed people and so did Charlie. Yeah. I mean, and really had a lot going for them. And had a lot going for him, and yet, there's a disconnect. The Enterprise crew, does see this as an issue, and it's what you were talking about towards the end. But ultimately, they feel powerless to help or to change it or to do anything. And I wonder if maybe that's not, even if it's not, because I still don't think that there was one. There are more important things than being liked. Is a big lesson here. Conformity is a big lesson here. Except I don't think any one of them is the one that's hitting you over the head. And so I wonder if this isn't a cautionary tale to parents as well, potentially, of, sure, give your kids the advantages that you have, but also, take an interest and have them meet other people and have them understand that, rape is bad and taking over a starship is bad.
Right.
Right. And it's better to be good than be liked.
Yeah. Well, it's saying that, young people need discipline. And, I was trying to...
What did you turn 50 since last?
I know, really? Yeah, really.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's this...
Not that there's anything wrong with 50-year-olds. I'm sorry. I will be 50 one day. I shouldn't... Ageist jerk. No, it's just all of a sudden you're like a headmaster at some school.
Exactly.
All right.
But it does kind of say that. Kirk is the disciplinarian. Kirk's a disciplinarian on the ship, and he's a disciplinarian for Charlie. And the Thasians have no, they're completely different species. All they can do for Charlie is give him power. They can't offer him a context for that power.
Right.
And Charlie, needs to be assimilated. He needs to have some sort of understanding of how to work with and live with other people. And when he can't cut it, the Thasians take him away. It's horribly sad that he will never be given that chance. But I was kind of thinking about that in a way of kind of like our own adolescence. And I don't mean individually, because obviously this is a big slice of life about what people are going through when they are at that adolescent age, and they're trying to assert a little power and a little individuality and feel out the world around them. But I also thought of this kind of in the bigger picture, kind of a bigger context, thinking that, this is sort of a message for humanity as well, that as we develop power, as we gain knowledge, and again, this is the 60s, this is the height of the Cold War, and we have nuclear weapons, and we have all these abilities. we still have to have the temperance of discipline to use that correctly and use it wisely. And I think Charlie kind of represents that a little bit. I don't think it was maybe the point that they had in mind as they were doing it. But if I were to extrapolate this to a bigger picture, that's what I would say.
It's an interesting idea. I mean, there's at one point Charlie says, and I actually liked it. I mean, it reminded me of, it's so terrible to keep referencing other works. It reminded me of the end of Pet Sematary when, the little kid says, "Not fair," and walks away. Mm-hmm. In the middle of Charlie X, Charlie says, "Growing up isn't so much. I'm not a man and I can do anything. You can't." Yeah. It's an interesting idea that Charlie represents mankind at his current stage in development, or at, his stage of development in the 1960s. Maybe more so in the 60s.
Yeah.
Because I didn't live in the 60s, and so I don't know what it was actually like to live in the 60s. The ideas that have survived, though, culturally, are the ones that say, "Oh, we were waking up to, this. We were burning our bras, and we were on our way to Woodstock," as you mentioned earlier. And
right,
culturally, things were shifting, and there was the Cold War, and we were just waking up to all these new ideas that we hadn't had in a while. Whether we did or not, we have this idea now that we knew that we were growing. Mm-hmm. And today it feels like we're more like Charlie than we were in the 60s. And now maybe that's just hindsight. Maybe that's just maybe we were just as headstrong and, forgive me for saying it, dumb in the 60s as we are today. But today we seem to have this idea of, we're grown and we can do what we want. And we're going to shove you over here. We're going to push you over there. Yeah. And no, we're not doing anything wrong, and shut up.
Yeah. And all you have to do is read feedback on websites, read the comments section on YouTube or Fox News, and you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is kind of an interesting idea to think that it feels like Charlie may apply. Maybe it's just because this is the time that you and I are living in, and maybe people would have said the same thing in the 30s. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it is sort of an interesting idea that Charlie does represent. I don't know what kind of what timeline do you want to put on it? That he sort of represents mankind. I mean, we always think we know what we're doing. We always think that what we're doing is right, and we don't have that sort of, maybe we should this thing that you end up wishing that Charlie had in a big way.
Yeah, well, the Thasians here are a lot like, other aliens that you encounter in Star Trek, and since we just did The Cage, similar idea, this all-powerful, kind of all-knowing, and they can look at humanity and say, no, you can't handle this.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of that.
Yeah.
Speaking as a human, I'm getting tired of
that. Well, we'll have a protest sign for you for, stop the human denigration. Yeah.
We'll sell T-shirts. I'm a human. Yeah. I can take it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is that similar idea that says, here we are an audience in the 20th or 21st century looking at a show set in the 23rd, but even that advanced, smart, and there's a word again, disciplined group would not be able to handle even more power, even more ability, even more knowledge. They have to take the baby steps to find it on their own and stumble on their own. So handing over somebody like Charlie is dangerous.
In fairness, though, the Thasians were actually thinking of humanity and Charlie in that in a different way than they were in The Cage. The
sure.
Thelosians?
Yes.
The Thelosians.
Telosians.
My apologies. Yeah, the names. The Telosians, said, no, you couldn't have this power because you'd ruin yourself. And that, to me, strikes me as a very chauvinist attitude. The race with whom we're dealing today, because I've now officially, the Thasians, thank you, officially confused their names. The Thasians, on the other hand, say, Charlie is basically like a loose nuke. If you want to put it in terms that we hear, on the news in the 21st century, he's basically a loose nuke. And the deal is either he will end up destroying humanity, or humanity will have to destroy him. Right. And the Thasians decide that what they really should do is go ahead and take him back with them. Now, I do believe that they're actually thinking this is what's best for everyone. I'm not 100% certain that it really is best for Charlie. I mean, maybe he can sit there for the next 15 years until another ship happens by and think, you know what he really should have done was maybe talked to Yeoman Rand.
Yeah.
Found out what she likes.
And Kirk would agree with you because, at the end of the episode, he makes that plea for Charlie to be among his own kind. And really, when it comes down to it, do the Thasians have the right to do that? They took him when he was 3 years old, gave him this power without his asking for it.
They did not take him. They saved him. He crashed on their planet. I mean, there is a difference. I mean, we're not talking about, we're not talking about an abduction here. We're talking about there was a kid on the rock. Right. And the Thasians said, let's raise him.
Sure. They allowed him to live.
Right.
Yeah. But maybe it's sort of like a zoo animal in that respect. When you find a wounded creature and then nurse it back to health, can they really assimilate back into their natural environment? You see that all the time.
It's like that squirrel running around my house right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Quiet him down.
He was
please.
a cute little baby when I found him, and I thought, oh, he's going to die, and now I've got this squirrel stuck in my house.
Yeah.
You actually say that Kirk argued with the Thasians. Kirk folded like a cheap tent twice in this episode. There were 2 times that he did this. The first one was, and really you can blame Kirk for the destruction of the Antares, because Kirk is talking to Charlie in the hall. And they call Kirk to the bridge because they're getting a message from the Antares. And Charlie says, "Can I come with you?" And Kirk says, "No." And Charlie says, "I'll stay out of the way." And Kirk says, "Okay." and he doesn't even do the crazy eye thing. Okay, this is not not mind control. This is just Kirk like being a pushover for this kid. And of course, then he's also a pushover for the Thasians because he says, "No, he needs to stay with us." And the Thasians are like, "No, really, you don't understand." And Kirk's like, "You're probably right." And then he then he kind of backs off it.
I think Kirk knew the power that he was dealing with, but that's the side of Kirk that I like seeing in this is that he gets flustered. That chat that he has with Charlie in the hallway about how there's no right way to hit a woman, or in this case, playfully slap.
Right. No hit.
He says
he's making the point. There's no right way to hit a woman, which is which is. I mean, we're in a different time now where, Andy Kaufman certainly broke the barriers as far as what men and women could do as far as combat are concerned. But generally speaking, this is a message, I think. And so maybe that's the message, too. Maybe because really a lot of Charlie's problems did start with swatting Yeoman Rand's behind.
Yeah.
Maybe the moral of the story is knock off that 1950s, pinching, slapping the behind. All your problems are solved.
Sure. But Kirk does try to give Charlie a little lesson in seduction later. Kirk's going to help him out.
Yeah.
He said, you got to go slow. It was great. And we see that this is a tactic that works for Kirk over and over and over again later.
Yeah.
So Charlie he had this opportunity really to learn from the best. But
he squandered it away.
Screwed it up.
Subtraction. What does X plus the Enterprise minus X leave us with?
So there are questions that we ask at the end of each episode. Do the messages stand the test of time? And does the show itself, the production itself, stand the test of time? I think we usually do the show first and then we do the messages. Let's do it the other way around this time.
Okay, sure.
Do them. Again, it's a difficult show. It seems to me a difficult episode in terms of message because there isn't one. There's not the ecological message, or there's not those kinds of things. There's not the is it okay to make people slaves? Message.
Right.
You kind of have to work to extract the messages out of this. But if we assume that the messages are. I don't know. Do you feel like the messages are prevalent enough to stand the test of time?
I don't.
Or do you feel like it's not a message show? I guess that's really the question.
Yeah,
because you can pull lessons from it, But this,
Right.
I mean, and maybe, I mean, it really could. I know this is how we started that conversation, but it really could be as simple as there are more important things than being liked. And if you want to say that that's the message, then I would say that message stands.
Yeah, to me, I just feel like the message, to find that message, you kind of have to reach for it. To me, this is really a show about the emotion, about sympathizing with Charlie and him being a fish out of water. He's so completely and utterly out of place and trying to find himself. So to me, this is more of a character study about that. And we as the audience get to sympathize and empathize and kind of go along for his journey.
Okay.
So
But, okay. Well, I'm just, where reaching for messages, kind of what we do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
Are you willing to? I mean,
yeah.
I would say to say that, there are more important things than being liked. That's obviously a message that stands. Yeah,
I do think that message does hold. The idea that, that there is something more important than being liked, that Charlie is very selfish and you can't force yourself upon others and make them like you. I do think that idea holds up. I just think
you're just really in love with this episode, aren't you? To the point that, you kind of, and I'm not, and that's fine, because, the next question is, does this episode stand the test of time? My feeling is that you are so in love with this episode that you kind of don't want to, you don't want to dig for the meaning, which is okay. Which is okay, because I think your answer and my answer would be the same. Does this episode stand the test of time? Resounding yes.
Yeah, well, the production does, but going back to the message, I just, we tried to find a lot of little messages in here because, like you said, there isn't a profound singular message about the episode, and I was kind of stretching a little bit with this idea of humanity being at its adolescence and needing to temper its power and sort of newfound power with some discipline. But again, I can't really say that the episode specifically is about that. So do the messages stand a test of time? Well, the ones that you can find within there probably do, but I don't think this is a heavy message episode.
You see, that's the thing, though, that's interesting about I might anger somebody, great art. Which I think after 50 years of people still sitting around talking about individual episodes, I think you could go ahead and put Star Trek in that, in that category.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be about all of those things to still carry those things with it. We had to work harder at finding messages from this episode, but I think the messages were there. And so, I would personally say that the ones that we pulled out do stand the test of time. And it's actually better that it wasn't, that we didn't get, and I know I've used this phrase before, and I probably will the whole time we do this show, we never got the "you see, Timmy." We didn't get like the thing at the end where they said, well, no, Charlie had to go with the Thasians, but I do feel it was for the best. What we get at the end is everybody sitting around just sort of like, man.
It's pretty grim.
That really, that really is it. I joked about Kirk folding like a cheap tent, but he doesn't really. He assesses the situation and decides that probably is the best thing, but probably is in there. I think he decides that probably is the best thing. I don't think he knows for certain that they've made the right decision and not fighting the Thasians a bit more. Now, he couldn't have fought the Thasians physically.
Right.
Because physically the Thasians weren't even there, which gives you some idea of their power. They weren't actually able to read them on their instruments, but they were there, and they were able to take Charlie back. So, they couldn't have fought them, but he might have tried to make a more compelling case. But I think, he decided that probably it was the best thing. And what makes this one of the best episodes to me, or at least a great episode, one that stands up, is the fact that you don't get the "you see, Timmy." Yeah. You and I could sit here, and if we wanted to take different sides, we could both make compelling arguments for why what Kirk did was right and what Kirk did was wrong. I found myself in the two times that I watched it preparing for this particular, recording, not 100% sure. not certain that it ended well. And I love the fact that I had a show that at the end of it, I could sit there and say, man, I don't know if that ended right or not.
Yeah. And with that, I agree 100% because I like the kind of grim. I mean, it just emotionally, it's grim at the end. Like I said, the lights kind of lower and nobody's really talking to each other anymore. And they're visibly shaken that Charlie has been taken away from them. And I like that sort of ambivalence that you don't really know what's in store for Charlie.
That's interesting. You say they're shaken that Charlie has been taken away from them. I think that they are shaken that they allowed Charlie to be taken away. I think they're shaken by the decision that they made. I don't think it's missing Charlie so much as, wow, we let that happen, and now we have to be okay with it, whether we're actually okay with it or not. Right.
But to me, just talking now about does that production, and that's kind of what we melded into here was, the production standing the test of time. Yeah, I think it's a very modern way to tell a story. Yeah. Instead of what a lot of TV at the time that Star Trek was on was doing and having this "you see Timmy" moment or wrapping it up neatly and having a sting on the end and a slap on the back and smiles to the camera while you run the closing credits. And that is not this show at all. So it really resonated with me, and I love the a little heightened at the end, but I really like Charlie's plea at the end because that drives home what he was after all along. He just didn't understand what it was that he was after.
So you see, Timmy, we're not sure if the morals actually stood up or if there were morals presented in the story, but we do think it's definitely one worth watching, and I think in some ways actually studying. What I don't know, though, is what we think about next week's show.
So next week, I can't wait to talk about this one, Where No Man Has Gone Before. And for those of you who are playing the home version of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, you know that we are doing these in broadcast order. Now, Where No Man Has Gone Before was the second pilot that was filmed after The Cage, but it was actually the third episode of Star Trek to air.
And we look forward to bringing it to you. Until next time, he's John Champion.
And that guy is Ken Ray.
And we will talk to you next week.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go work on my people skills. We will talk to you next week. End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.